Good morning, everyone. I am Crystal Joy de la Cruz Faustino, and our topic for today is all about the social issues that concern schools and society. So, we will talk about the top 10 global issues. First is the climate change. Second, pollution. Third is violence. Fourth, security and well-being. 5. Lack of education. 6. Unemployment. 7. Government corruption. 8. Malnourishment and hunger. 9. Substance abuse. And 10 is terrorism. So, after the top 10 global issues, we will also talk about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So, now, let's proceed to the climate change. So, what do we mean by the word climate change? Climate change refers to a long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. These shifts may be natural, but since the 1800s, human activities have been the primary driver of climate change due to the burning of fossil fuels, which produces heat-trapping gases. So, climate change is more frequent and intense drought, storms, heat waves, rising sea levels, melting glaciers, and warming oceans that can directly harm animals, destroy the places they live, and wreck people's livelihood and communities. It is also about the worsening of air, water quality that increases the spread of certain diseases. So, let's now proceed to pollution. What do we mean by the word pollution? So, pollution is the introduction of contaminants into the natural environment that cause adverse change. So, when we say pollution, it is the process of making the environment pollute by adding other harmful substances. So, pollution causes an imbalance in the environment. This is can be threatened by the very survival of all forms of life. So, we have here different types of pollution. First is the air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, and noise pollution. Now, let's proceed to the violence. When you say violence, it is the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person, or against a group of community, that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, and maldevelopment of deprivation. So, we have here various forms of violence. We have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. First is the physical violence, to be followed by sexual violence, emotional violence, psychological violence, spiritual violence, and cultural violence. Now, let's proceed to the physical violence. Physical violence occurs when someone uses a part of their body or an object to control a person's actions. So, when we say physical violence, ito na yung harm na physikalan, yung nasasaktan na siya physically. So, now, let's proceed to the sexual violence. Sexual violence occurs when a person is forced to unwillingly take part in sexual activity. So, madali naman na siyang intindihan, di ba? When you say sexual violence, about ito sa sexual activities. Yung mga yung mga forced sexual activities. Now, let's proceed to emotional violence. When you say emotional violence, it occurs when someone says or does something to make a person feel stupid or worthless. So, sa emotional violence naman, ito na yung nasasaktan na siya emotionally. Kung dun sa physical violence, nasasaktan siya physically. Sa sexual violence, nasasaktan siya due to the forced sexual activity. Dito naman sa emotional violence, emotionally na. Next is the psychological violence. Psychological violence occurs when someone uses threats and causes fear in an individual to gain control. So, ayun. Next is the spiritual violence. Spiritual violence occurs when someone uses an individual's spiritual or spiritual beliefs to manipulate, dominate, or control that person. So, about spiritual naman na tong spiritual violence. Kapag pinipilit na siya sa mga spiritual beliefs niya or nadidiscriminate na siya due to his spiritual beliefs. Next is the cultural violence. Cultural violence occurs when an individual is harmed as a result of practices that are part of her or his culture, religion, or tradition. So, ayun, about culture naman na tong cultural violence. Kapag nadidiscriminate na siya due to his cultures.
So, let's talk about government corruption. Means of corruption include graft, bribery, embezzlement, backdoor deals, nepotism, and patronage. Corruption is a measure of poverty considering how it affects the poor the most, eroding political and economic development, democracy, and more. Corruption can be detrimental to the safety and well-being of citizens living within the vicinity, and can cause an increase in violence and physical threats without as much regulation in the government. There are many factors that can contribute to government corruption, including weak institutional frameworks, lack of transparency and accountability, and a culture of impunity. Addressing corruption requires a multi-phased approach that includes strengthening legal and regulatory frameworks, increasing transparency and accountability, and promoting ethical behavior and integrity in public service. In general, government corruption is a serious problem that needs to be addressed in order to promote good governance and protect the public interest. This requires a sustained effort from all stakeholders, including government officials, civil society organizations, and the public at large. Next is the malnourishment and hunger. Currently, there are 785 million people who do not have enough to eat. Long-term success to ending world hunger starts with ending poverty. By fighting poverty through proper training or employment, education, and the teaching of cooking and gardening skills, people who are suffering will be more likely to get jobs, earn enough money to buy food, and even learn how to make their own food to save money. Malnutrition in all forms includes undernutrition, inadequate vitamins or minerals, overweight, obesity, and resulting diet-related non-communicable diseases. So, as I said a while ago, malnourishment and hunger are serious issues that affect millions of people around the world, particularly in developing countries. Malnourishment refers to a condition in which the body does not receive the proper nutrients it needs to function properly. Hunger, on the other hand, refers to the physical sensation of discomfort or weakness caused by a lack of food. In a report on malnourishment and hunger, it is important to provide an overview of the extent of the problem and its impact on individuals and communities. This can include statistics on the number of people affected, the prevalence of malnutrition and hunger in different regions, and the health and economic consequences of these conditions. It is also important to discuss the root causes of malnourishment and hunger, which can include poverty, limited access to food, lack of education about proper nutrition, and environmental factors such as drought or natural disasters. Providing context on these factors can help to illustrate the complexity of the issue and the need of a comprehensive approach to addressing it. In addition, the report should highlight efforts to address malnourishment and hunger, including government policies, international aid programs, and community-based initiatives. This can include examples of successful inventors and best practices that have been effective in addressing these issues. Overall, a report on malnourishment and hunger should provide a comprehensive overview of the problem, its causes and potential solutions by raising awareness of this issue and highlighting effective interventions. The report can help to mobilize support and resources to address malnourishment and hunger and improve the lives of those affected. We also have substance abuse. Substance abuse is the harmful or hazardous use of psychoactive substances, including alcohol and illicit drugs. The United Nations report that by the beginning of the 21st century, an estimated 185 million people over the age of 15 were consuming drugs globally. The drugs most commonly used are marijuana, cocaine, alcohol, amphetamine, stimulants, opiates, and volatile solvents. So, substance abuse can have serious negative consequences for individuals and society, including physical and mental health problems, social and economic costs, and increased risk of accidents and injuries. It can also lead to addiction, which is characterized by compulsive drug-seeking behavior despite the negative consequences. There are many factors that can contribute to substance abuse, including genetic, environmental, and social factors. For example, individuals who have a family history of addiction may be more susceptible to substance abuse, while social and environmental factors such as peer pressure, stress, and trauma can also play a role. Addressing substance abuse requires a multi-phase approach that includes prevention, treatment, and recovery. Prevention efforts can include education and awareness campaigns, as well as policies and regulations designed to limit access to harmful substances. Treatment and recovery efforts can include a range of interventions such as counseling, medication-assisted treatment, and support groups. Ultimately, reducing substance abuse is essential for promoting individual and public health, as well as for reducing the social and economic costs associated with addiction. This requires a sustained effort from all stakeholders, including individuals, families, communities, and government agencies. So next is Ms. Karen Joy Pragata to discuss terrorism.
Good day everyone, I am Karen Joy Badwa Fragata and I am going to explain what is terrorism. But first, let's define what is terrorism. Terrorism in its broadest sense is the use of intentional violence and fear to achieve political or ideological aims. The term is used in this regard primarily to refer to intentional violence during peacetime or in the context of wars against non-combatants.
Security and well-being. The UN is a perfect example of what should be done to prevent security and well-being, a serious global issue. Through its effort with regional organizations and representatives that are skilled in security, the UN is working toward increasing well-being of people throughout the world. So, security, the sense of being safe physically, emotionally, and environmentally. And well-being is more about the condition of soul. Let's proceed. The lack of education. More than 72 million children throughout the globe that are of the age to be in primary education are not enrolled in school. This can be attributed to inequality and marginalization as well as poverty. Fortunately, there are many organizations that work directly with the issue of education in providing the proper tools and resources to be aid schools. So, lack of education for many children who still do not have access to educate. It is not able because of persisting inequality and marginalization. Next is unemployment. Without the necessary education and skill for employment, many people, particularly 15 to 24 years old, struggle to find job and create proper living for themselves and their families. This leads to lack of necessary resources such as enough food, clothing, transportation, and proper living condition. Unemployment causes work to suffer financial hardship that impact families, relationships, and communities.
So, those are the top 10 current global issues according to Chloe Turner. Now let's go to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals or the SDGs for the year 2015 to 2030. So the first SDG is the no poverty or end poverty in all its forms everywhere. By 2030, it eradicates extreme poverty for all people everywhere, currently measured as people living on less than $1.25 a day. The next SDG. The second is zero hunger or end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. By 2030, end hunger and ensure access by all people, in particular the poor and people in vulnerable situations, including infants, to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food all year round. The third SDG is good health and well-being. It ensures healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. So by 2030, it reduce the global maternal mortality ratio to less than 70 per 100,000 live births. The fourth is quality education. It ensures inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. By 2030, it ensures that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. The fifth SDG is gender equality. It achieves gender equality and empower all women and girls. So it eliminates all forms of violence against women and girls in the public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation. Now, here is the sixth SDG, or the clean water and sanitation. It ensures availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. So by 2030, it achieves universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. Let's go to number 7, affordable and clean energy. It ensures access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So by 2030, it ensures universal access to affordable and reliable and modern energy services. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. It promotes sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. So, it sustains per capita economic growth in accordance with national circumstances and, in particular, at least 7% gross domestic product growth per annum in the least developed countries. Number 9 SDG, Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure. It builds resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. So by 2030, it significantly raised industry's share of employment and gross domestic product in line with national circumstances and double its share in least developed countries. So SDG number 10, or reduce inequalities. It reduces inequality within and among countries. So by 2030, progressively achieve and sustain income growth of the bottom 40% of the population at a rate higher than the national average. SDG number 11, or the sustainable cities and communities. It makes cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. So by 2030, it ensures access for all adequate, safe, and affordable housing and basic services and upgrade slums. Number 12 SDG, sustainable consumption and production. It ensures sustainable consumption and production patterns. So by 2030, halve per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest losses. So number 13, climate action, or take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. So, it is strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate related hazards and natural disasters in all countries. Number 14, life below water, or conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. By 2025, it prevents and significantly reduces marine pollution uh, of all kinds, in particular from land-based activities including marine debris and nutrient pollution. Number 15 SDG, Life on Land, or protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. So by 2020, it ensures the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of terrestrial and inland freshwaters ecosystems and their services, in particular forests, wetlands, mountains, and drylands, in line with obligations under international agreements. So, number 16, SDG, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions. It promotes peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. So significantly, it reduces all forms of violence and related death rates everywhere.